All right, we'll get started. Firstly, thank you everyone that's made the effort to jump on the webinar today. We just like to sort of point out this is not a sales pitch from Ubi Park. It was about, we were going through a lot of discussions with our customers and colleagues and partners last week and suppliers. We were seeing lots of different carnage, I suppose, going through the industry last week. And we just wanted to do what we could to maybe help. And the idea of the webinar today is to provide some information to people that maybe help with anxiety or stress levels that they may be going through. We know that there's been a lot of staff being stood down in the industry over the last sort of week and a half, and we are expecting that and seeing that there'll be more of that sort of stuff to come. We start off with a little bit of housekeeping. So just so everyone knows, so the toilets, in my place, it's just down the corridor and the first door on the right. Smoking out the back fence and over the top and keep going. But no, on a serious note, just if we can keep everyone with their microphone off and their video off during the presentations, what we'll do is we'll have the three speakers come on individually. I'll do an introduction, they'll come through. We can then listen to what they're saying, and then obviously there'll be some time for some questions and answers after that. If you can use the chat function, which is located down the bottom of the screen, to put your questions through, then I can then ask you to ask that question, and you'll get you to unmute and put your video on so you can ask the question directly to the panel member at the time. If there's any questions on the way through to me as well, just put them through the chat and I'll be able to answer them as we go through. So the format for the day is we'll have Simon Peterson, Dr. Simon Peterson, who's our chiro, my chiro. He'll speak about the COVID-19 virus and some of the myths that are in the media at the moment. Then we'll be followed by Adam Sellers, who is from MCA, our accountants. And Adam will talk about some of the federal government stimulus packages that have been out. And they'll be followed up by Stuart Norman, the CEO from Parking Australia. Just to give us an overview of what Parking Australia have been doing over the past few weeks and what they're continuing to do going forward through this crisis. So I'll start with Simon. So Simon's my chiro, and does an amazing job with this finely tuned body that I've got. So Simon posted a video last week to his clients, which I was one of. I got that video, and it was probably the first time I sort of understood some of the intricacies of the virus, and I thought it'd be great to actually hear a little bit more about the virus and some of the stats and some of the myths, I suppose, that are in the media that Simon was able to point out to it. So I'll pass over to you, Simon.
Beautiful. All right, Michael, thank you for having me, and hello to everyone. So my role, first off, as a chiropractor and why we're actually open, and I'm talking about chiros, osteos, physios and things like that, is that people mightn't be aware that 30 to 40% of the people that actually admitted to hospital come to them for musculoskeletal issues. So they're trying to keep us open, or APRA, which is our registration board, is trying to keep us open as long as possible to alleviate a lot of pressure on the hospitals by, and at some stage the hospitals will not be accepting any musculoskeletal issues if they get this flood or this wave of clients which they're seeing in other countries as well. So that's why we're open, and if you're wondering why chiros, physios and osteos are opening, and we're just alleviating that pressure on the medical system. So that being said, then I want to talk about COVID-19 or coronavirus and what it is and why I suppose that there's a lot of fear and around it. But first off, I want to state that it's not something you should fear. but it's something that you should give respect to. And what I mean by that is that I've got a 47-kilo dog, and I'm not afraid of that dog whatsoever, but at the same time, I'm not going to allow my 3-year-old to be there with that dog by themselves. So I respect the dog, but I don't fear it. Okay, it's the same sort of thing as this virus. The more understanding you have of it, the better you'll be, and your fear will go right down. So hopefully I can give that to you today. So let's talk about the virus itself. It is a droplet-based product, and what that means is it can't survive out of the body unless it's within a droplet. And what we're talking about droplet, we'll talk about spit or a fluid of some sort coming out of you. And generally, we're talking about the virus travels in sneezes and coughs. And we're talking about a sneeze will travel at about 148 kilometers an hour as it comes out. And that sneeze can travel around 1.2 meters, unless we're trying to go for distance. So it travels about 1.2 meters, hence the 1.5 meter distance is what we're looking at. Okay, so this is why they're traveling at that 1.5 distance. So what we can do, understand that the virus is like a tennis ball with arms. And what I mean by that is that it's got all these things that can grab hold of you. However, it doesn't have any legs, so it can't move. So the only way that it's going to be transferred to others is in those droplets, or if you brush up against someone or someone touches someone, that it can grab onto them. So therefore, you need to wash your hands and get that hygiene really, really good. But then again, there's also the other side of it is that in order for it to get to your lungs, you have to either breathe it in from the droplets in the air from someone sneezing or coughing, or you're putting your face, you're touching your face with your hands and putting them near your nose and your mouth in order for it to get to the lungs itself. So what we can do to protect ourselves, one thing, we can increase our immunity. We can practice good hygiene, obviously, but we can increase our immunity. And a lot of people are talking about vitamin C, and it is very, very crucial. Where they're even using it in America to treat people with COVID. Singapore has told all its residents to get intravenous vitamin C. So it's actually really important. There's a lot of data out there to show how important vitamin C is. And we're talking, I'm taking currently 20,000 milligrams a day. If you don't know, so one of those little tablets that people are getting, they're between 500 to 1,000 milligrams. What I'm doing, I've worked out that 20,000 milligrams is what they call your bowel tolerance for me individually. How you work that out is getting around 4,000 milligrams into you, and then every 15 minutes having another 1,000 milligrams until your tummy feels squirmy or it comes out the other end. And then you tone it back 1,000, and then that should be your daily dose. Okay. A lot of people talk of 2,000 milligrams being a high dose. Well, I'm taking 20,000, but that's my bowel tolerance. That will increase your immunity, and therefore understand that if that gets to your mucosa or the covering of your nasal passage and throat, therefore your immune system can actually stop it before it gets down into your lungs. Second part is I talk of rice water. That's cooking up a little bit of rice, about that much, and actually having a dessert spoon of that water. And what that does is it goes down to your gut, but it's starch. And all your probiotics, which a lot of people know about, those probiotics within your own gut will proliferate. So you can either have some rice water every day, which we do in our family, or you can have probiotics. And what probiotics do is, again, that mucosa that I was talking about, or the lining of your nasal system and your throat and lungs, that will produce IgA levels, increase IgA levels, and that's what the probiotics do. And what the IgA will do is that COVID, when it gets into you, it'll eat it up. Okay. So, all right. So let's talk about the COVID-19, what it actually does if it actually gets into you. Well, what happens? It goes down into your lungs and irritates the lungs, obviously. Then what the lungs do, the lungs will scream for help, 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 help. And what comes to those areas is what they call cytokines. Cytokines are like your alarm system to the immune system. So they go to those areas that have been affected and then they start screaming, help, 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 help. The problem with that is that it calls in more cytokines, which is a good thing. But what the virus does, which is an RNA type virus, they actually invade those cells, get into the cells, and what it does there, it replicates. And what it does to the cytokines, it makes them overstimulate them, so they call more cytokines in, and therefore the virus can replicate a lot more, so that's a good thing. Also, what these cytokines do, they call for what they call killer T cells or T1 cells. And they come from your thymus, which sits underneath here. And why they're important, they're the Pac-Man of your body and they will chew up the virus. So we want to encourage that behavior. And people don't understand, but the thymus in children is really, really big. So they produce a lot of these killer T cells or these T1 cells. And they're fantastic because they do work. But this is why the children have got this great immunity. However, after puberty, that thymus will decrease in size. You produce killer T cells other areas, but this is really important. But by the time you're 75 years old, that thymus will be only a little bit of fatty tissue. So it doesn't produce much killer T cells whatsoever. So that's why the children have got this really good immunity and it's not really attacking them. But what else? You're getting these cytokines. Cytokines will also call in what they call Th17 cells. And these are really important and why people are dying. And what that means is that these Th17 cells will come to the area, and what they do, they make the cells of the lungs bring out fluid. And when they bring them out, which is phlegm. And why this is beneficial to the virus is because your lungs start filling up with fluid, and why it's beneficial to the virus is what do you feel like doing then? You want to cough and sneeze and get that out. And that's just how it's spread. However, why it's detrimental to the organism is that your lungs fill up with fluid, therefore bacterium can get in there, like pneumonia or pneumoniae, which is the bacterium of pneumonia, and that's where people are getting these respiratory issues. And then they get on top of that, they get what they call a cytokine storm, and that gives you a fever and all these other symptoms as well. And so the pathophysiology, or what's happening in your body, this is why it's dangerous. But remember, now let's talk of some stats. Even though we sounds horrific, the amount of people that are dying from this virus, a lot of them are dying with it, not because of it. And also understand that if you're healthy, the 80% of people that get this virus will have minor, if not no symptoms. So when you look at the US stats, are a fantastic one to look at, that 98%, 98.4 to be precise, 98.4% of the people that are diagnosed with corona have an underlying health issue. I'll say that again. 98.4% of the people that have been diagnosed with corona have an underlying health issue. Okay, that says to me that people that are healthy are not either not getting it, or they're getting it so minor that they not even displaying symptoms, so don't even want to go and get tested, so they don't even know they've got it. So there's some stats. Another stats that are really effective that we need to look at, and actually you start got to dig a little bit deeper with these stats. And my wife she's a researcher, so that's how I know a fair bit about all these stats. The Italian, let's talk about the Italian stats and all the deaths they had. you tend to find that you look at the stats, they're that high, and the death rate. But understand that death rate was their total death rate. That if someone got hit by a car, they go into those stats. And then you actually see the stats go along, and then they drop significantly. And that's where at that stage, when they found out what was going on, they differentiated between people who are dying of corona compared to their normal mortality rate. So this is what they're reporting on, is this, not this one down here. So it's not as severe in Italy as what they have you be aware of, or what the media is jumping on. You know, it's still, again, respect this, but understand that we need to not fear it. Okay, so when you look at the stats and look at how it's actually traveling, we're not traveling much worse than what a common flu is. Even though for us to hear that 1,600 people died in the US, you know, last night, I think, understand that that's not wavering too much from where we're at. What they're afraid of, though, is that with the flu, you get it one day, you get the symptom the next day. With COVID, you get it one day, you may not see it for 14 days. And the scared point about that is they don't know if you're contagious within those 14 days. This is why they're getting people to self-isolate for the 14 days. So that's the scary thing about this virus, is that you may be talking to people and they've got it, you might get it, you don't even know. Hopefully that's alleviated a bit of fear from you, and give you some tools that you can do. Obviously try and reduce your stress levels, because that's going to impact on your immunity within itself. Yeah, how's that, Mostyn?
That's great. Thanks, Simon. If anyone's got any questions, just send them through chat, or just let me know through the chat, and then we can go to you to ask those questions. I might kick it off though, mate. I'm sick of hearing flattening the curve.
Yep.
I understand. You know, there's obviously different modelling that came out yesterday and stuff like that. So can you sort of take us through what the government is actually trying to do with putting us into lockdown?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So because of those 14 days that we're talking about, and so they do believe that 70% of our population is going to get it. Okay. Understand that 70% of our population will get that. We'll get COVID-19. What they don't want is we all get it at the same time. So that's what we're talking about, flattening the curve. They believe that we'll all get it, but we don't want to get it all at the same time, because that will overwhelm the medical system. And that's when people that really need the help, the 5% of people over 75 that need the help, they won't be able to access it because we're overwhelmed. Also, too, I forgot to actually say, that response, that Th17 response, where you start producing fluid, vitamin D will down-regulate that response. So 10,000 IU of vitamin D will stop that response as well.
Great. We've got a couple of questions coming through, Simon. So Craig Nadeau, Craig, if you just want to unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Hey, Craig.
Simon, how are you, mate?
Yeah, very well, but always getting better.
Good to hear. What vitamin C do you recommend we should be taking?
Oh, well, generally, look, most vitamin C, it's all about your bowel tolerance. So it doesn't really matter. Personally, for our family, what we do, we went down to a compound chemist, and there's plenty around, and then just ask them for ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C, but ask for ascorbic acid, and we get it in the powder form. So generally how I have it, and my wife makes me up I should show, but just a little bottle. She puts the 20,000 milligrams in there with some orange juice, and I just stir it up and drink it during the day, and just have sips of it. It tastes pretty harsh, but to be honest, now I'm actually pretty used to it. So any sort of vitamin C, just look at the milligram content of the ascorbic acid within that vitamin C, either tablet or powder, and then work it out for yourself.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
That's great. We might leave it there, Simon. I really appreciate your time today.
Pleasure.
We'll get some details out around Simon and the Instinctive Chiropractic business with the information we send out after the webinar today. So thanks again, Simon.
Beautiful. Thanks. Hopefully I help. Bye-bye.
So second up today, we've got Adam Sellers. So Adam's an accountant from MCA Accountants, which is the Ubi Park company accountants. And Adam's been helping Ubi Park navigate through all the different stimulus package and support packages that come out from the government. We're going to concentrate today on the federal government stimulus and support packages. However, if you have got any questions around the state sort of stuff, Adam's happy to take those offline and talk about them a bit later. So I'll hand over to you, Adam. I think you've got
Thanks, Mostyn.
a couple of slides, haven't you?
I do. I'll share those in a sec. Just for Simon, that was probably the best summary of the virus I've heard anywhere. So that was pretty amazing. So I'll share my screen. Hopefully this works. So I presume you guys can see my slides or slide. Beautiful. So I've got a fair bit to cover. I'll probably run through a fair bit of it pretty quickly. Any questions, throw them in the chat box and Mostyn will get it through to me. So assistance the government's handing out that can be accessed by pretty much everyone. First one there, the coronavirus hotline. If you owe the ATO money, don't hesitate to call them. They are being extremely generous at the moment. You can pretty easily get payment plans between 3 and 6 months, or even complete deferrals for that period of time. Low interest payment plans, all that sort of stuff. You just have to be honest with them and upfront. If you put your head in the sand, if you ignore their letters, they won't help you. If you give them a call, they'll be generous. For businesses and individuals that have investment income and they get a quarterly activity statement asking for income tax, you can vary those down to 0, and you can also claim back tax you've paid in the first 2 quarters. I would be personally wary about claiming that tax back because you do have to pay it back at year end. But if you need the cash flow, it's an option for you. There were changes to Fair Work in the last couple of days. Basically, employers get a lot more flexibility as to what they can get their employees to do. Most of it has to be agreed upon between the employer and employee. So, you know, employers can't just create all those draconian rules and require employees to work long hours and all that. It needs to be on agreement, but there's a lot more flexibility there, which helps, basically just helps businesses stay open. There's rental relief, both commercial and residential. From the commercial side, there's been this big code of conduct released by the federal government. It's a fairly long read, but I've got some links to it that I'll send through. From a residential side, that's more state-based. Pretty much, it's just a memoriam, just preventing people from being evicted from homes at the moment. But hopefully, the state government has some more guidance on that soon. And the last one there is bank loan payment relief. Most banks, if not all of them, are really generous on just giving people with home loans, business loans, 3 or 6 month deferrals. I'm yet to hear anyone have too much trouble with that. So now I'll move on to stuff that's specifically for individuals. The top one there, Job Seeker, is what Newstart used to be, and it's essentially the dole. There are some conditions around it. The asset test has been waived, but the income test still exists. So you need to have had your employment affected by the coronavirus, and your income must have dropped below $1,000 a fortnight. In addition, your partner has to earn less than a certain amount, and it's a family test where your family income has to be less than $3,000 a fortnight. The actual thresholds can change a little bit based on your situation, whether you're living separately, partnered or single, that sort of stuff, but they're ballpark figures. In order to get Newstart, if you're a permanent employee, my understanding is that you have to have lost your employment. So simply having your hours halved isn't enough, but for a casual, having your hours dropped is enough. I'm trying to get clarification on that, but that's my understanding at this point in time. Job Seeker is also available to sole traders and self-employed. However, most of those people will get the Job Keeper payment that was recently announced. And as I said, casual workers there. For a lot of Centrelink recipients, they will get a coronavirus supplement. It's $550 a fortnight, and as I've got there, it's all or nothing. It's not phased out. So if you get $1 of government help, you will get the full $550 coronavirus supplement. There's also one-off payments of $750 to a number of Centrelink recipients. Essentially, it's the New Start, youth allowance, all of that sort of stuff, plus the age pension, carers and veterans. The first payment, I think, went out last week, and another one is due in a couple of months. There's a few other things there for individual: early access to super, free childcare, minimum pension withdrawals for retirees. I won't go into detail on those, so I don't eat up too much time. For businesses and specifically employers, so the cash flow boost was announced 2 or 3 weeks ago. There's a lot of confusion about it. The wording cash flow boost is completely misleading in my opinion, because essentially all the government is doing is they're covering the pay-as-you-go you've withheld from your employees. So you lodge it on the BAS, you get a credit equal to that amount. The ATO don't give you the money and then say to you, yes, you can pay it back, but pay it back in 6 months' time. They don't give you the cash. The only time you get cash out of it is if your BAS is an actual overall refund. For example, if you've got a GST refund or you've claimed back your tax instalments. The minimum payment you receive if you're eligible is 10 grand. It's reported out there it's 20, but it's actually 10, and the maximum is 100. As a general rule, it's dollar for dollar, pay-as-you-go tax withheld between 1 January and 30 June. So on your March BAS and your June BAS, whatever pay-as-you-go withholding you've got on there, that is the figure the ATO gives you. But it is a minimum 10 grand. There is a second group of payments from July to October, where whatever you got in the first group of payments, so from 1 January to 30 June, you will get that amount again between July and October. So in that July to October period, it's not based on your actual withholding, it is simply what you got before. So I'll move on to bank loans. Government are guaranteeing 50% of a special coronavirus loan. The government is not making the loan. I've heard that a fair bit, that government are lending money, the government are not lending money. Because it is a bank loan, the banks still want people to jump through the normal lending hoops. So, I mean, we've applied personally for an overdraft for our business, just in case things fall apart. And we've got a whole big long list of questions we've got to go back with. They want to know how our business is affected. They want a cash flow projection for 12 months, things like that. So it's not easy to get, but if it's a thing that keeps your business alive, then you should absolutely invest the time in it. Other thing they're doing for employers, wage subsidies, accelerated depreciation claims, but if no one's got money to buy things, that's probably not overly relevant. Insolvency laws have been relaxed, and the National Code of Conduct on commercial leases. So I'll move on and focus on the JobKeeper payment. It was legislated last night. We've got a fair bit more info now than what we did a week ago, which is great. So just going down there, applies from the 30th of March, but the first payment isn't made until May. So you'll get a lump sum payment in May, covering that period of time. It's for 6 months, so from March through to the end of September. To be eligible to get it, the business needs to have a drop in turnover of 30%. Now, the ATO have clarified they're going to work this out based on BASs. So that means if you calculate your BAS on a cash basis, then they will calculate turnover on a cash basis. Also makes getting your BASs right really important. We don't want to be in the situation where you put the wrong figure on your BAS, become eligible to it accidentally, and then have the ATO come back to you later on wanting that payment back, because they will do it. You can be eligible for only some of the 6 months. They are doing it on a month-by-month basis. And what they're going to do is on the 7th of each month, they're going to ask each business to tell the ATO what their actual turnover was for the last month and what their projected turnover is for the next month. So businesses will need to be on top of their books. It'll be a big change for a lot of people, but if it again means keeping the business afloat, it's something you're going to have to do. There's been talk about what employees are eligible, and I want to define wages in this context. Wages are payments made to employees that are regular with tax withheld from every payment. There are a lot of businesses out there that the owners pull money out as and when they need it. That is not a wage. Those people are not eligible to get the JobKeeper payment under that wage definition. The ATO and the government have made a concession in the last day or two. Business owners will be able to nominate one person of the business to get the JobKeeper payment where that applies. So if family trusts in particular, quite often the mum and dad in there won't take out a wage. They'll just pull money out as needed. At the end of the year, the accountant will split the income, however is most tax effective. They don't fit the wages criteria, that the ATO will allow that trust to say mum or dad can get the JobKeeper payment. So that was a pretty big concession because there was a lot of talk about that. What to do next is really just to finalise it all. Number one there is accept that the system is unfair, because it is. There are people getting stimulus that probably don't need it, and there are lots of people not getting it that do need it. There's no point fighting the system. There's no point wasting your energy getting stressed about it, arguing about it. We just have to accept that it is what it is. You're welcome to write to your MP and write to the government. That might get some change, but other than that, for your emotional health, just accept it is what it is. It's not easy to make $300 billion worth of stimulus payments and design it from scratch and do that in a few weeks and get it right. So, you know, they've done the best they can. Ideally, they would have done better, but they haven't. Be patient. The JobKeeper in particular has only just been legislated. It will take the ATO time to get processes in place. Take Centrelink, as we've seen, to get processes in place for the job seeker. And a plug for us, accountants, we're only just getting our heads around it as well. I had to stay up late last night to read legislation and guidance and all that. Just if your accountant says to you, give me a week, I can only suggest give them a week because it is difficult. The ATO, Centrelink, they've made intent to claim forms out there, which is not the full claim form, but it's really just you're putting in your interest and saying, hey, I want this. The good thing about them is that when you finally do fill out the proper forms, they will backdate your eligibility to the day you put your intent to claim in. So it's really important to do that. And I've got links on how to do that Mostyn will forward around after the... same thing for the job seeker. Do the intent to claim. As soon as you lose your job, as soon as a casual or something like that, your hours drop, get on there and register your intent to claim. If it turns out that you don't need to claim, you can just redact or withdraw that claim pretty easily. You need to do that via MyGov. MyGov is the ATO's online platform. The ATO is moving a lot of stuff onto MyGov, so it'd be worth setting that up anyway. You're going to need it eventually, but if you're a job seeker, you will need to do it via MyGov. Similar for JobKeeper, there is an intent to claim. There's been close to 1 million businesses registered so far. That number will keep rising. From an employee and employer relationship point of view, you need to communicate. Employers need to go to their accountant, find out more information. We've got a couple of brochures that hopefully will help people that are here today. If employers are intending to claim, communicate that with your employees so they've got some certainty and work together. Employers probably aren't going to start paying everyone $750 today when they're uncertain what's going on. Employees need to accept that and just there just needs to be give and take both ways. Working arrangements, again, be open-minded. Employers might ask people to work different hours to what they're used to. Employees might turn around and say they can't work their normal hours because their kids are at home or something like that. The kids are not going to school. So just everyone needs to be flexible. The only way we're going to survive and get through this is by being flexible. And for the cash flow boost, it applies for the JobKeeper as well. There are integrity provisions in there to stop people changing their employment arrangements in order to get more money out of this. It is really, really easy for the ATO to pick this stuff up. My only advice is don't try it. It's not worth it. The ATO will come down hard on people. As an accountant, we've been warned by our professional bodies and the Tax Practitioners Board that we face significant penalties for helping employees and employers get access to more money than what they're otherwise able to. It's something they're cracking down on. And lodge your BAS by the 28th of April because that's when payments start. You don't need to do it earlier. You just have to have it in by that day. And that's everything I've got there, Mostyn.
Great. Really appreciate that, Adam. It's very insightful, and it's definitely been a big help for me over the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
We've got a couple of questions.
Go for it.
Anthony Pappas, if I can get you to just unmute, Anthony, and ask your question, please.
Yeah, good day. My question is in regards to the jobs. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Yeah, just in regards to the JobKeeper payments. Not sure if that covers partly owned government organisations that are not for profit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so government organisations, I don't believe it does, but not for profits, yes. Charities have a 15% turnover reduction threshold, so it's easy for them to get to it. And for charities that take donations, donations don't get reported on BASs, but they are taking donations into account when assessing that 15% drop in turnover. As for your particular situation there, where it's partly government owned or government run, I'm not entirely sure, but if you want to shoot me details, I'm happy to look into it for you.
Yep. Cheers. Will do.
Thanks, Anthony. Simon, you've got a question. Simon Peterson, do you want to ask your question, Adam?
Yeah, g'day, mate. My question is, when they're looking at that reduction of 30%,
yep,
are they comparing it to last year at this stage?
Yeah, so
what are they comparing it to?
Yeah, primarily it's the same period last year.
Yep.
Where the last year's period was outside of normal,
yep,
or you have lumpy income, as they call it, so very seasonal.
Yep.
The ATO are allowing you to use a different method.
Mm-hmm.
The details around that are still being finalised. I believe the ATO will require you to explain why last year isn't appropriate, yep, and provide some sort of detail or evidence as to why you're using what you intend on using as your comparison.
Yep. Okay.
So particularly startups and fast-growing businesses that applies to. Startups obviously may not have a prior period comparison, so
yes,
the prior month, the prior 3 months might be the most appropriate method.
Okay. Beautiful. Thank you.
That's Simon. That's some of the challenges we're going through. We didn't think we were going to be eligible at all for JobKeeper, but we might be able to apply it.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yes, that's right. I've got a question from Andrew Thornton. Andrew, can you unmute and ask your question, please?
Yeah, look, thanks, Adam. I had a question just in relation to people that might have lost their jobs before JobKeeper was announced.
Yep.
Are you able to reinstate them and then they'd be eligible for JobKeeper, or is it too late? You've got your redundancy letter. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no, so generally you can, if they were laid off after the 1st of March, they can be put back on and you can claim the JobKeeper in full for that person and have that paid out to them. There is a potential issue with people that have been paid out redundancy, annual leave, long service leave payouts, because my understanding of the law and how it interacts with the Fair Work Act is that that employee is treated as if they never left the employment. So it is we're trying to get clarification, but I believe that the employee may need to pay back to the employer their redundancy payout. Now, the employee probably doesn't have the money floating around for that, so that would need to be a discussion where, you know, maybe some of the JobKeeper payment is withheld and used against what is effectively a loan. We're trying to get more clarification on it, but that's my understanding. But in general, yes, you can put back on employees that have been stood down or let go completely.
Okay, great. Thanks. We're just seeking for that advice while we're trying to work out if we've met that 30% threshold to what to say in the meantime.
Yeah, so for me, it would be worth ringing those employees and saying, hey, we're going to try this. We're going to see if we're eligible. We're going to apply for it. We want to keep you on. So if we can get eligibility, if we can get access to it, we will keep you on and we will pay you the $750. And just ask them to be patient with you.
Okay, but apply for JobSeeker in the meantime.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Apply for JobSeeker. If they get JobSeeker and they should have been getting JobKeeper, Centrelink might ask for the JobSeeker back. But the wording I've seen is that they might be a little bit relaxed on it.
I suspect most people would be happy with the second outcome anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
We've got one question. I don't think that question was answered, Stuart. So I'll get you to ask your question, Stuart, because I'm keen to understand appeals as well.
I actually don't know exactly the appeal process for this. There is an appeal process, but as to what it is, I can't really answer at this point. Yeah, something I'll probably look into, and I can shoot Stuart an email or something like that and answer his question directly.
Great. All right. I think we'll leave it there, Adam. Really appreciate your time.
No worries.
Definitely insightful for the group. So we'll move on. So Stuart Norman, who's the CEO of Parking Australia, is just going to give us a quick update on what Parking Australia has been doing on helping the industry out over the past few weeks and what's the future's looking for. Are you there, Stuart?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mostyn, for the opportunity to speak to everyone, and thank you, Adam, just for what you had to say. It's just in addition to what Adam just said, Parking Australia has some information on our website, not just about the federal government stimulus measures for business, but also the state government measures. For those I'll just go through a couple of examples. For those in Victoria, you can apply for a small business grant, and you can do that through the link that's on our website. In Queensland, businesses can get interest-free loans, for example, and there's also a lot of other payroll tax concessions, etc. So all that information is on the Parking Australia website with all the list of all the state stimulus measures. The federal information that's on there is all up to date as of before yesterday afternoon's announcement around the details of JobKeeper, and we will get that up as well. Now, what I wanted to do is go through just 4 points. Just bear with me. 4 points around what's happening in the parking industry. First of all, what we're doing, hang on, let me go back. Here we go. I want to start with what we knew about the industry to begin with. Then we want to go on to what we know now, what we're doing, and also what we've achieved. And I know we're mindful of time, so I'll try and be fairly succinct. And I probably won't hit each of the points on the screen, but I'm sure that you can have a look at them. So what we did know about the industry was that revenue was in excess of about $4 billion per year. That's including airports, local government, private operators, universities, etc. What we do know is that private car park rentals are in the vicinity of 300 to 360 million per year. We'll come to that point a little bit later when we talk about the Commercial Tenancy Code of Conduct. We knew that the state congestion or parking space levies in those 3 states collected about 300 million. We've got what councils earned in revenue across the country from fines and fees. Parking industry employed directly around 10,000 people. That's not indirectly, that's directly. And that the parking industry minus what assets, as in the parking facilities, are worth, around 4.7 billion a year. We also knew that private parking occupancy was at about 90% or above across all the major capital cities. What we know now is that it has affected every part of the industry, both private, public and suppliers. But what I think we've been trying to communicate as of this week to the relevant governments is that the effects of COVID-19 or coronavirus haven't just been in the last 3 weeks, even though the effects have been drastic in the last few weeks. The parking industry's felt these effects that go back right to late January. And you may remember Chinese New Year celebrations were closed down or shut. I know in Melbourne, Sydney and Adelaide, for example, parking facilities around where the Chinese New Year celebrations were cancelled had significant drop-off in revenue as compared to previous years. As I said, we know that all segments of the industry have been affected and that car parks have not been included in state government shutdowns, and we've sought clarification on this. It's interesting, the governments have not said that you don't, well, they didn't say that you're an essential service. They did say for car parks that they are to remain open. And what we also know is, and this is the key one around the Commercial Tenancy Code of Conduct, is that especially the private parking operators have received little to no tenancy relief whatsoever. In fact, you could almost say the attitude has been go jump, which has been really disheartening as of late, given that we have pushed hard for the parking industry to get some tenancy relief through our discussions with the federal government around the Commercial Tenancy Code of Conduct. We also know that councils like the Brisbane City Council, just before their council elections last week, offered free parking, free on-street parking. Now, I'm pretty sure that when the Lord Mayor announced this just prior to the election, on the Friday, and election was on the Saturday, he had no understanding of the unintended consequences it would have on private operators. We also know that Victoria and Western Australia are really reluctant to budge on their congestion or parking space relief, for any relief for the industry. And here's the big kicker. Private car park occupancy has dropped to about 10% across our major cities. So you think about it, was 90 or over 90, it's now down to 10. Now, that's occupancy. That's not talking about permanents or taking permanents out. That's just actual occupancy, not revenue. And then you've got airports offering, some airports offering free parking, which has hit off-site airport parking severely. And then we've got the health unions and the public calling for free hospital parking and not really having an understanding of how the parking industry works. So the last couple of days I've been speaking with those unions to educate them on how the parking industry works. So what we're doing, we're working with state governments around the congestion levies. Sorry, I've missed there's a typo in there. I'll fix that one up later. We've been in direct contact with the federal government via their Corona Business Liaison Unit, which is a unit set up specially to liaise with peak bodies and for us to feed information and for them to seek information on the way back. We've been in direct contact with various media outlets, had a radio interview, been filmed for 9 News, which hasn't been aired yet, probably over the weekend, and that's going to go nationally. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of members who have got concerns and pressure points and also just want to have a listening ear where they can talk to someone. So that's what we've had many phone calls around that as well. You may have seen our promotion around contactless payments and apps that we started a couple of weeks ago, and a list of all of those. And if you haven't done that, can I recommend that you do? We've been busy collecting some data. And the last one is in response, probably not, because Parking Australia has the businesses as the members and not the individuals, our focus has really been on the businesses, but not as much on the individual. Excuse me. I'll share some information about this partnership with an organisation called Quality Minds. Quality Minds are offering a free 7-day program, which really is not necessarily just specifically about mental health, but it does have aspects around mental health to it, has aspects to do with resiliency, but it really is trying to help people with the way that they think and the way that they can look forward and set goals, and then how they might get to that. Now, there's a 7-day free program for that, which will then give you contact, and we'll put some details around that on our website and via our social media channels. And lastly, last bit, what we've achieved. We have got a 6-month deferral on New South Wales parking space levy, with continued discussions with the New South Wales government around making sure the payments going forward are around usage. We've educated some health unions, been in contact with the federal government around tenancy relief. We're also, the ATO of considering this, and the Commissioner for Taxes going to put some sort of recommendation through around what we could do around fringe benefits tax on car parking, and whether we can get something that can be changed, not legislatively, because that would take time, but in the relaxing of the rules. So they've agreed that it has health benefits for people to drive, and that businesses may want the health benefit for their employees to drive and park. And at the moment, businesses would have to pay fringe benefits tax on that. So we're trying to get a waiver on that to encourage businesses to purchase parking on behalf of their employees. There's some congestion levy relief that you can see we've been trying to get. We've been in contact with the capital cities around the unintended consequences of free or unenforced parking on the streets, and making plenty of media outlets aware of the issues related to the parking industry. As you can imagine, it's not easy to get some media coverage at the moment, and some days when you think you will get it, the High Court will put down a decision and kill any opportunity that you may have had or anything that you may have scheduled. So that's just a quick rundown from a Parking Australia point of view, and hopefully that wasn't too quick, Mostyn, but I didn't want to drag it out either.
Very good, mate. No, appreciate your time and you taking us through that. I think you know, the individuals and helping people that have been stood down, and that initiative is a great initiative. So congratulations on pulling that together. I'd just like to Anthony Pappas has got one question around the levy, Stuart. So Anthony, if you could just unmute and ask a question, please.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, sure. So you mentioned the 6-month deferral of New South Wales parking levy, and obviously with Victoria that hasn't been brought into place yet. Do you know if there's some discussion about that, or how?
I can tell you there is discussion. We have engaged with a political lobbyist who has met with the Victorian Treasury and put forward a document that we've put forward. I mean, we've written on a couple of occasions. I've spoken with people in Treasury. I've spoken to some chiefs of staff, but they've actually, as recently as late last week and again yesterday, sat down and talked about it. Where it's currently at is the Treasury are putting together some recommendations for the Treasurer to consider.
Yep. Okay. All right. It's just obviously, but most businesses are continuing to operate as usual and at a very reduced capacity. and often reducing their rates as well, with no relief with congestion. So I guess that's a concern around that. So hopefully we get some relief with that soon.
Yeah, great.
We hope so. And look, it's a big one. I know of facilities that if it, don't even worry about the rent, occupancy is not even covering the congestion levy.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Great.
And also, to add on to that, it's not as if the Treasurer doesn't know about this. This is the annoying bit. There's members of Parking Australia who have great influence, and one of them owns a football stadium in Docklands, and that information has been put forward from the very top of the AFL to the Treasurer. So when Treasury go, oh, we don't know about the issue, frankly, it's straight out bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got one
Oh,
last
cheers.
Stuart from Andrew Thornton. So Andrew, do you want to unmute yourself and ask that question, please?
Yeah, Stuart, it was just a question for the forum as much as anything else. I work for the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife, and we're getting lots of people who are refusing to pay because they're going to die if they touch one of our machines. Just wanted to see if anyone else has got any tolerance for that. We're saying if you're that sensitive to it, you probably should have stayed at home. But again, just using the forum to ask, is anyone getting pressure or issues to waive fees because of the fear of using the machine, as opposed to a council decision that, you know, fees are inappropriate at this time? Thank you.
Well, I've got a question sort of that comes back to you. Is there a way, is there a contactless way for them to pay?
There is. It's about putting their rego numbers. You know, they have to touch the machine to enter a license plate number. Now we can have some tolerance around that, but at this point in time, we're not going to accept as a defence for someone that gets a fine for not paying. They didn't want to use the machine because of COVID. There needs to have been a more substantial reason than that. Again, it's just, that's our position. I just wanted to see if anyone else has taken a different position, because I'd like to say we're all standing together in terms of that specific question.
Stuart, there's no contactless solution there, so they've definitely got to touch the machine. So
they can do a tap and go for their credit card, but they'll still ultimately have to touch the machine.
is there anyone in the on the webinar that's actually experiencing that? Who, you know, just unmute yourself and answer if you have. We might leave it there, Andrew. I can sort of maybe get some information. Stuart, I'm sure, is talking to a few other operators that may be going through that. So we might take that offline and get some more details back to you after the webinar.
Thanks, appreciate that. Thank you.
Great. Really appreciate your time, Stuart, and definitely Adam and Simon. I know he's just dropped off. Really appreciate the three of you guys. I hope it's been. I hope the information's been well received and it's been informative to the people that have jumped on. Really appreciate it. We've had a really good turnout today, so hopefully it might be something that we can continue to do something in the future. We've recorded the session today, so that'll be pushed out to everyone that's registered today. Also, we'll be putting some stuff out on our social media. So if you want to keep up to date with what we're doing, please jump on our social media channels of LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and just follow EV Park. That'd be great. Any feedback that we could receive from you guys today and what went well, and anything that you want to reach out to me personally, we'd love to talk to you, and anything we might be able to help out with. We know everyone's going through some tough times, so if there's anything at all that you know, even if it's just a chat, we're here to help out. So once again, thanks for everyone for attending, and our speakers for giving up their time today. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mostyn.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Mostyn.
Thanks, Michael. Do you want to stop sharing your screen, Stuart, please?
Yep.
if anyone wants to have a quick chat, I've got 10 or 15 minutes. So if there's anyone that wants to say hello, just unmute, put your camera on. I'm here to have a bit of a chat if you've got time. Hey, Russell.
How you going, Mostyn?
Hey, Larry. How are you, mate? How's things?
Good. Yeah, very good. That was a good session.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope it was a little bit of information, something a little bit different. So
It was interesting, and it was short and sharp, and yeah, excellent. Good idea.
Thanks. How's Perth?
Yeah, good. Going down to the beach now.
Make sure you're social distancing.
A bit of exercise. The bloody parking market's shot to hell, but other than that, pretty good. When are you're not coming over here at all, are you?
No plans to travel, obviously, at the moment, but we have got a few projects on the go in Perth. So as soon as we are ready to travel, it'll probably be one of the places we're heading. So
give me a shout.
I'd love to, mate.
Are you playing golf?
I am. Well, Russell, our general manager from the golf club's jumped on too. So yeah, we're not playing. We're closed, and the club's being affected by it. So are you open?
We're about to open. Social only. Clubhouse is closed. Maximum 2 people. You're not allowed to hit the ball into the hole, and so you can go along. You can play 18 and bugger off. That's really it. It's not bad. A couple of courses have done that this week. We're about to start next week.
Yeah, great.
But you'll get a couple of wankers. You'll have a few beers in the car park afterwards, and then they'll close it down again. That's the problem. It's the same with the beaches here. If people start congregating on the beaches, they're going to close the beaches this weekend.
Yeah, it's definitely happening across. So
anyway, mate, I'll say goodbye to you. I'll be in touch another time.
Thanks for attending, mate. I appreciate it.
That was good. Cheers.
Anyone else still on that wants to have a quick chat? Looks like we're all gone. All right, we'll wind it up there. Thanks very much for everyone that's still left on. Really appreciate the support of jumping on, and hopefully it was a little bit informative. So thank you, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.